So for those of you who are jumping into the video asynchronously, I asked our attendants the people in attendance to ask some questions. And one of the questions was, how long should this be? Showing and not just telling, making sure your audience is there with you, experiencing things, takes space. I don't think you can do this in less than 3 pages, double spaced. My narrative, because I'm writing this essay alongside of you, since it's a little, like I've taught literacy narratives before, I know how to teach that. I've taught lens essays before, I know how to teach that, but I've never merged these concepts before. And so I'm writing this along with you so that I can get the feel of, like what's difficult. And what I'm finding is my literacy narrative is going to be about 4 pages. I wanted my readers to be with me, understanding like what I was experiencing through my eyes. And in order to add those kinds of details, I exceeded that 3 pages. I think some of you will not, and when I'm done revising, I might take some things out that I decide are not relevant. But I'm thinking 3 to 4 pages is about good for the literacy narrative portion. The lens portion is going to be a little longer. I'm thinking 2.5 to 3.5 pages. I've just started mine and still, like I've just moved the transition and I'm playing around with that. And so if you log on to see my version 4, I'm creating copies and copies so you can see what I'm adding and why I'm adding it. So you can see my progress. I'm not a very linear writer. And some of you are, some of you aren't. You know yourselves. At the same time, this essay is really, really different from anything you've probably written in the past. So that's the length portion. When this is done, I suspect you're going to have anywhere from 6 to 8 pages. Some of you might have more than that, and I think that that would be fine, but you're just going to want to really, really think, what are these portions doing? Am I guiding an audience? And I want to emphasize, you are writing for an audience of your peers. You shouldn't envision me as the audience. Yes, I'm grading it, but I want you to make it compelling for an audience of students who are first-year students, who are taking RWS 200. What's going to be compelling for them? What's going to be interesting for them? As far as the structure of body paragraphs, that's going to vary. When you're writing an academic essay, there's a really clear topic sentence and development. Narratives work a little differently because you're telling stories. And so you might have some reflective paragraphs where there's a clear topic sentence, but when you're telling the story, there might not be a clear topic sentence. You might have dialogue that's just conversation. So you have one sentence that's something you say, one sentence paragraph that's something somebody else says. I didn't add any dialogue in my narrative because I'm a reflective person. That's my personality. And so all of mine is just like remembering, here I'm doing this, here I'm doing this. So the paragraphs are going to vary. When you move into the lens section, I suspect you will have a lot more traditional essay paragraphs. I'm not sure, did that answer the question? That you asked about body paragraphs? You can just put it in the chat, yes or no.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Riley. And then somebody asked about, does the point of the narrative have to be clear at the beginning? I don't think so. I didn't think, I mean, like, I'm thinking about the essays that we read about McBride's essay. He hinted at the main point at the beginning of his essay, but he really didn't get to the main point until the end. He was building toward that main point, that we need to listen to the voice of the oppressed, through the songs of the oppressed, because otherwise we're contributing to them. We'll miss that opportunity to not be oppressors, to change the situation. And we don't get that till the end, although every story is building on that. Similarly with Callie Linfor, which you've all read, it's story, 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 and we don't really see what she's doing until the end. So I'm borrowing a lot from that I think the point of my essay won't be entirely, of my narrative portion won't be entirely clear until the last 2 or 3 paragraphs. I'm almost done with the narrative portion of my essay. There, I would say in Wynn's essay, his main point is clear. He doesn't state it. It's clear after the first 2 anecdotes he tells. He doesn't state it explicitly, but it's hard not to come to that conclusion of his main point is that we will all benefit from hearing the stories of diverse people. It's hard to miss it, but he doesn't get to the explicit ideas until the end. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Yeah, these are things, and here's the deal, is I've done some of this writing before, but I know that this is sort of new for a lot of you. And so whenever we're writing something we've never written before, it feels awkward, it feels uncomfortable. Personally, I always ask, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? I feel confused. I don't know what I'm I don't know what I'm saying. And so, like, I copy pasted in the PowerPoint, I copy pasted this. This is from the syllabus. I don't know if any of you read the syllabus from beginning to end. Mine is sort of conversational. I told the director of the Writing Center, Catherine, who is my mentor and my boss and a friend. I said, yeah, my syllabus is 7 pages. She says, Erin, that's horrible. Nobody's going to read that. I go, yeah, but I want to, like, I want to convey who I am. She laughed at me. But I'm coming back to it here. And I put in bold some ideas that I want you to remember right now if you're confused. No matter the level of your writing, reading, and thinking skills, this class is going to guide you into new ways of engaging in critical thinking, reading, and writing. I'm your mentor, and I'm allowing you to practice. I'm correcting your errors with kindness, affection, praising your achievements. At least I hope that's how it comes across. But this course is a lab of learning. I expect you to make errors. I expect you to struggle with some of the tasks, to be confused, and to experience that horrible feeling of not knowing. Because if we don't do that, how do we ever learn anything new? It's in the not knowing and trying that we start figuring things out. And I do expect you to ask questions, to seek assistance, to be metacognitive. That means to be thinking about your processes, to reflect on your own learning, to explore the concepts, to apply feedback, and to become increasingly uncomfortable with uncertainty. I know this is hard. And yet at the same time, I see you making progress. I see you making that attempt to evaluate your own writing, to really be metacognitive. If you're wondering why I always have those reflective things, this is why. This is the reason why I do that. I want to have that opportunity for you to ask questions, for me to give you feedback, for me to be that mentor who guides you. This is this week, and in some ways it's going to seem like we're not doing as much as we've done in some other weeks, but everything that you're doing is going to push you into that not knowing zone. We do not have a synchronous class session on Wednesday. During that time frame, from 10 until 11:45, you can conference with me. I'll send out a sign-up sheet when we're done with this class. If you want me to take a look at something you've written, to give you feedback on it while you're writing, if you have questions about anything, that will be there. I also want to give you a short lens instruction video because some of you are going to want to move ahead to that lens portion if you haven't done it already. On Thursday, April 8, submit a copy of your narrative to the Canvas discussion board and to a secondary link. In the discussion board, you're going to write a letter to your reading group about what you want them to give you feedback on. There's also a reflection on that lens instruction video. Let me get out of let me go to Canvas. I want to show you the discussion board. I hate it when this happens. I'm sorry, Canvas has this weird, or not Canvas, but Zoom has this weird thing that, stop. Okay, I know what to do. Sorry, it's like I forget every single time what I'm doing. And I know that joke is old, but my apologies. I had the page open that I wanted to have open, but this is that discussion board. Oh, this is last week's discussion board. That's not helpful. This is the peer review for the narrative, and this is just the narrative. This is what I want from you. You are drafting this essay in sections over a series of weeks, and so it makes sense to have the same people give you feedback throughout the process. This is worth 30 points, and you are going to write a letter to your peer readers. That's worth 10 points. It's going to be multiple paragraphs. You will lose points if you try and do this in one paragraph. But I want you to give some context to your audience, like what is your inquiry question? What have you discovered? Like what's your main point that you've come up with? That gives your peer readers the opportunity to say, it really wasn't clear that you were asking that question, or yeah, it was really clear, and I can see how you're building toward that main point. It allows you to get that feedback because we know that we learn from other people. I want you to let your readers know what you think you've done well and what have been your main challenges. That gives them the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I think you did that really well, or here's something I think you did well, and to give you some feedback on your challenges. And then 2 questions you want your readers to answer related to your essay. Alternatively, you might identify 2 things you'd like feedback on, like give me feedback on my hook, or give me feedback on my main point, or give me feedback on this memory of visiting Iolani Palace. Sorry, that's my narrative. Are there too many details or not enough details? I mean, that's the kind of thing that I want you to do. So that's what your letter is going to do. Post a Google Doc link of your paper. Be sure to adjust permissions so that anyone with the link can comment. Okay, that's really important that they be able to put comments on the page. So you are also going to give responses to 2 students. Consider the letter and make sure that you comment on their paper, focusing on the things that they want feedback on, and then respond in the discussion board with a letter to the author that addresses the questions they ask. So it might be, Dear Emily, you said that you did really well on this thing, and I agree. I really liked this part. Or you said you wanted feedback on, did the main point make sense? It made sense sometimes at the end, but I wasn't sure how that story made it make sense. So you're going to give them written feedback on that. Don't correct their grammar or spelling issues. But here's some examples of things that you might comment on. In all cases, remember you're helping the student identify revision points. Be kind, be encouraging, offer suggestions, okay? And then you're gonna see their paper next time around. Any questions about the peer review? To get full credit, you definitely are putting feedback on the paper and in the discussion board in the form of a letter. Don't just say, hey, that was great. You will not get full credit. Any other questions about this? Okay. Let me come back to the PowerPoint and just go over a few more things. It's loading. So that's Thursday, you're posting a copy. Remember, nobody expects this to be a polished copy. It's just the narrative. You are going to have some time to revise. And so, again, this revision process is going to take a little bit of time. And so, don't be afraid. Everybody is wrestling with the same things. And so you're going to understand each other. Your feedback to your peer reading group is due Saturday, and the reflection direction journal are due Saturday. That's this week. Again, it doesn't look like a lot of stuff, but writing takes time. And so I don't want to give you a lot of other things to do when you're writing. As you're writing, I want you to think about what stories do. And I keep coming back to these same quotations. Narratives provide a way to speak things otherwise unspeakable, to give voice to that which would otherwise go unheard. When we look at the stories of our lives, we learn new things about ourselves. I've been really surprised as I've reflected on my own stories, as I've narrowed down my literacy stories about, like the influences in my life. But as I started thinking about them, what I was reading, why I was reading, how I felt when I was reading, I started to learn new things. And things I lost, things I'm rediscovering. And I don't think I would have seen it that way if I hadn't done that. And so look at your stories that way. What can you learn from remembering? And the remembering comes in stages. I'm going to show you some things that I worked on in my own essay because I want you to try and do some of the same things. Here's this. We didn't read Harriet McBride Johnson. She writes this really powerful personal essay about meeting Peter Singer, who advocates abortion of babies who have severe deformities or disabilities. And as you can tell, she has pretty serious disabilities. And yet she's brilliant. She's an amazing storyteller. She's a powerful, intelligent woman who spoke on behalf of the disabled. And her essay that I've had my students read in the past is super compelling. And she says storytelling itself is an activity. It's not an object. Stories are the closest we can come to shared experience. So when I read her story of interacting Peter Singer, I begin to experience what life is like in a wheelchair because she allows me to experience that. And I begin seeing from her perspective what all the theories about eugenics are about. She loves life. And I begin to see it through her eyes. She says, like all stories, they are the most fundamentally a chance to ride around inside another's head and be reminded that being who we are and where we are and doing what we are doing is not the only possibility. Who I am is not the only thing. It allows me to see her experience. That's what you're doing for somebody else. You may think who you are is the most normal thing in the world, but it's not. Who you are is entirely different than who I am. And in our storytelling, we allow somebody to see through our eyes. So you've been brainstorming to discover an answer to an inquiry question. And you've been thinking in terms of stories, images, and asking, how can you use your stories to illustrate that answer? How can you organize your stories to allow readers to see your discovery? How do you organize your stories to engage readers, entertain them, pull them in, and get them to care? And so this isn't the same thing as a free write like you did at the beginning, because now this is, like once you've brainstormed and done free writing, Now you've got to organize the stories and tell them in a way that gets somebody to come along with you. And that's what makes this narrative process difficult. I can tell stories about myself forever. But if I want to build a main point, and I do, then I have to think, all right, how do I put these in order? What parts do I include and what parts don't I include? A lot of things that I really like are out of my narrative, which makes me a little sad, but we can all write more narratives. As you're writing, think of the personal essays we read at the beginning of the semester. All of them started with a compelling hook. All of the stories authors told point in time stories, not general memories. There were some of those general memories, but they were point in time stories, like this thing happened, that allowed the readers to see the writer's point of view, that allowed them to experience distinct situations. All of the authors pulled the readers into the story, allowing them to see the writer's point of view, and they weave between showing and telling to lead readers to some distinct conclusion. So here's the story, and now I'm reflecting on it. Learn from the authors, look at their strategies, try new things that you've never tried before. As I started to do that, I started to think of, like how I might, well, it gave me freedom to, like experiment. Experimentation is really, really valued. It's why I reminded you of the theater, of the syllabus and what I wrote at the beginning of that. Those of you who read Tim Bascom know that he's talked about how reflective essayists aren't starting with a thesis and going boom to, like prove that thesis. There's a little meandering around the subject until arriving away from what is expected. Surprise your readers, Paul Graham said. It's not a reference work. It's not something you're reading looking for a specific answer. It's like cleaned up conversation. It's like thought processes, only cleaned up. I mean, like when I'm thinking all over the place. But in an essay like this, I get to do that. You get to see my thought process, but with maybe some of the tangents that aren't relevant taken out. So, and then a lot of you read about Philip Lopate. We all think that we're kind of boring, and yet we all have quirks that we're not boring. We have things that are unique about us, and so like we have to build ourselves into a character so that somebody can see us, who we are at a certain place and a certain time. I want to return to this idea. I think we looked at this in week 4. All writers have more to learn. So if you feel like this is too hard, you're getting stuck, you just have more to learn, as I do. I find myself getting stuck in my head. It seems very easy. As I'm writing, I'm getting stuck. So I'm learning in the process of this essay. That isn't because I'm a bad writer. This isn't because you are a bad writer. This is just like we're always learning more. Writing varies by situation and context. I'm guessing you've never written an essay quite like this. It's a process, but it's not the same process for every text or every person. You'll see my process, but you may have a different process. But it's going to be different than the essays you've written before, which is going to make it hard. You're going to have to figure that process out. And honestly, that's part of writing. Writing Literacy is connected to identity. Your voice is going to sound different than mine in your paper. That doesn't make your voice a bad voice, or it doesn't make my voice a bad voice. It just means, like, we're all different. We all write differently. We all have different voices. I want you to tap into the voice that you're most comfortable with. And all writers learn from knowledgeable peers. This is all for that, but I do want to take you to my essay, which you'll be able to find on Canvas. And I want you to point out some things that I added. Those of you who read Hip Hop Planet by James McBride noticed that he started with a hypothetical scenario. And I wanted to do something similar. I felt like my time frame is different. If I'm writing to first-year students who are taking RWS 200, if they don't know I'm a teacher, then they're going to think that I grew up at the same time as them. And so I wanted to create a setting. And so I did that. Once upon a time, there was an ordinary little girl who loved Once Upon a Time stories. She grew up in the early years of television, but her family couldn't afford one. So she listened to stories on a record player while she looked at pictures in a book, turning the pages when she heard the page turning bell. She hadn't yet learned to write, so she told her own Once Upon a Time stories, drawing pictures of ordinary girls who became princesses on scrap paper her father brought home from work. She imagined this was her story. That ordinary little girl was me. Some funky stuff in there. I don't know if I'll keep it, but I like some of the things it's doing. Because now, instead of seeing the awkward 12-year-old, you're seeing this little girl who just is in love with stories, all stories. And so I wanted that. Here's Philip Lopate and James McBride inspired me here. I'm experimenting. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm willing to try. So I'm experimenting because I want you to see me in a specific place and time and know what motivates me. This is my quirk. I love stories. The other thing that I started changing is I zoomed over this part about visiting Iolani Palace, which I'm just going to tell you, I do remember this field trip. I remember going to Iolani Palace with my class. I don't know if it was second grade or first grade. Remember, I am very old. This is a long time ago. But I remember it really clearly. Yes, I loved Once Upon a Time stories. Kings, queens, princesses. I really did believe that perhaps Prince Charles would discover me in America and I would be the princess that he would marry. I know it's a little delusional, but Princess Di was the same age as me. So that didn't turn out so well for her. I think I'm better off doing what I do. But I do remember this, and I remembered being super excited, and I do remember visiting the room where Queen Liliuokalani was held prisoner. And I do remember thinking how horrible that was, and that it was unjust and unfair that the kingdom had been taken away from her. And but I zoomed over that in my copy of a sample essay, not my copy of a copy. And I thought the injustice portion was really, really valuable. And so I started remembering. And I needed to do a little research, and it wasn't serious research. This was Google research. I visited the Iolani Palace website. It was remarkable how much was in my memory, in the recesses of my memory. And I started recreating it. Here's where I think I have too much, but I wanted to, like set it up, like here I'm in this place, it's magical. I love Once Upon a Time stories. And then Queen Liliuokalani is held prisoner for 8 months. And I'm struck about the injustice. And I wanted to know what happened. And it really did propel me on reading every book the little library had. And so, like I had to make this a lot more immediate. And so instead of a general memory, I made it a point in time memory. I'm in there. I worked on this morning because I felt like that was really valuable. And yes, I did have to do some research. I didn't remember when the Kent State shootings were. I knew it was 68, 69, 70. It was 1970. I did not know that in 1972. There were a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't learn about the Freedom Riders in the 60s until I was out of college. Yes, it's very, very awful that what I didn't know. But let me stop share. We've got a few minutes left, and I've talked about a lot of different things. More questions you have for me? Or about the essay or the narrative portion? Remember, that's the only portion that is due this week. All right, if there are no questions, then I'm going to close out this meeting. I'll stick around if you have more personal or more questions that are just specific to you. I can stick around until I have to be in the Writing Center at noon. You are all dismissed. Um, I hope the discussion was helpful, and I'm sure you'll let me know. Have a great rest of your week. I hope to see some of you on Wednesday. Bye.